First of all, is it your decision not to testify based upon consultation with your counsel?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You understand that your decision...
That the ongoing drama in the Casey Anthony trial in Orlando this day. As you heard, she will not be testifying in her own defense. After 6 weeks of testimony in this trial, the case is now one step closer to going to the jury. This afternoon, the defense finished its presentation to the jury. Jay Gray is outside the courthouse in Orlando. He begins our team coverage from there with the details. Jay?
Hey there, Michael. Yeah, and more drama in the courtroom here in Orlando today. Look, Casey Anthony's father, George, was the first to testify in this case. Her mother and brother followed. And today, as the defense did rest its case, we learned if one more Anthony would take the stand.
Do you know George Anthony?
Yes.
The defense closed with a flurry.
Did you develop a relationship with Mr. Anthony?
Yes, sir, I did.
And was this an intimate relationship?
Yes.
Crystal Holloway directly contradicting earlier testimony from George Anthony and then telling the jury he had shared information about his granddaughter's death.
When he said it was an accident that snowballed out of control, but I was caught off guard with it, and by the time I looked up, he had tears in his eyes, and I didn't say anything after that.
In cross-examination, prosecutors pushed to establish that that was George Anthony's thought at the time, not something he knew as fact.
But he didn't claim that he actually was there or knew that.
You're right. I agree with you. He didn't.
Later, Casey Anthony's father, mother, and brother were all called back to the stand. The line of questioning from Jose Baez centered on how the family's pets were buried.
And then put him in the plastic bags and then wrapped him with packing tape.
The obvious correlation is to the items found with Kaylee Anthony's remains. Prosecutors, though, fired back.
I take it that you did not euthanize your own pets with chloroform.
Mr. Anthony, have you ever taken a dead pet and thrown him in a swamp?
No, sir.
And after a morning of testimony, only one Anthony was left to possibly take the stand. And in a case with so many lingering questions, that, one of the biggest, was answered this afternoon.
And it is your decision not to testify.
Yes, sir.
Okay, Mr. Baez, you may call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense rests.
Now, the prosecution began its rebuttal this afternoon. The jury could have this case by this weekend. Live in Orlando, I'm Jay Gray. Michael, back to you now.
Jay, any real surprise among legal observers that Casey Anthony did not take the stand to testify?
Michael, I think as the trial went on, and as Jose Baez in his opening discussion with the jury alluded to some things about molestation by George Anthony and the drowning, that the only way that could have come into testimony here is if Casey Anthony actually took the stand. So yeah, I think there are some observers who thought in the end that she would have to get to the stand for that to become a part of the court record. Now it's going to be very curious to see how he argues any of those points in his closing argument, because they have not been a part of this case, and the judge has already indicated he's not going to allow anything that's not been a part of the record to be a part of those closing arguments. So yeah, there were some who thought she may take the stand. Of course, the common theory is you never put someone on the stand, especially someone who her own defense has said is a known liar.
Jay Gray reporting for us from Orlando. As always, Jay, thank you. And our team coverage continues now with legal analyst Michelle Suskauer joining us live from our newsroom. Michelle, your thoughts about her not taking the stand. You told us yesterday you didn't think it would happen. The defense clearly thought too big a gamble. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, sure. There was nothing for them to win. There were no points that they're going to get out of her that was going to be helpful. If she was basically served up to the prosecution, they would have sliced and diced her. And so this was not a good move to put her on. So at least that was a positive step the defense did today. But there were so many missteps, I think, that they did.
Amplify on that thought about the missteps as you see them from the defense?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think they ended certainly with a whimper and not with a bang. They did not deliver what they promised. And the defense does not have to promise anything. They do not have to put on a case. And they made promises. promises that there was going to be evidence that was going to come out that this child drowned in the pool and that George Anthony was complicit in it, and that did not happen. They did not deliver. The last evidence that we heard that they put on was about the way that the Anthonys buried their pets, talking about the way that they were put in a bag with tape, and that may really have just bolstered the state's case. So that was a misstep, and the other misstep was really what we call opening the door, making some legal missteps to allowing the suicide note of George Anthony to actually come into evidence that the jury could read, which was helpful to the state.
Michelle, there is a common assumption, I think, among the viewers of this trial that the jury has really only one choice. Was it premeditated murder or not? And if it was, and if they should find her guilty on that, then they'd have to decide whether to recommend the death penalty. But it's more nuanced than that, is it not, in terms of what the jury can come back with?
Oh, absolutely. And the jury form, and we may actually be able to see the jury form before the jury gets it. It may be able to be blown up and as a visual. But the jury is going to have a variety of different choices, not just capital murder and not guilty, but everything in between. And she's not just charged with capital murder. So they could find her guilty of second-degree murder, of manslaughter, aggravated child abuse. There's a variety of things they could charge her with. So just because she may not be found guilty of the top charge of premeditation, she could still be found guilty of other charges where she could be spending the next 15 plus years in prison.
Michelle Suskauer, our News Channel 5 legal analyst. As always, we thank you for helping us sort out all that's been going on in the courtroom. And a reminder, you can follow tweets from the Anthony trial. You don't have to be on Twitter to do so. Just head to WPTV.com. Our live updates from inside the courtroom are on our homepage.